Human performance technology and its application in educational technology. My name is Donna Kendrick. I attend Liberty University, and this presentation is for Class EDU 732. The key points that will be focused on in this presentation will be human performance technology, educational technology, and reading interventions. You will learn about the history of human performance technology, also known as HPT. A definition for the purpose of this presentation will also be discussed, and HPT core guidelines. For educational technology, it will also be defined, and we will discuss how HPT and educational technology can be integrated. We'll also discuss the educational technology and reading interventions. We'll look at professional development and some reading interventions that will help to improve students with reading difficulties. Thomas F. Gilbert is known as the father of HPT. He wrote a book in 1978 called Human Performance. In his book, he discussed human performance technology and human performance, and Gilbert came up with the idea of attaching a value to performance and accomplishments. And then he developed a behavior engineering model to name six aspects of behavior to increase performance. As we think about human performance technology, we're looking at a performance gap. Then we have to analyze the situation and what caused the performance gap. And then we want to look at the intervention and make sure that we have one developed. After the intervention is implemented, then we want to go down and evaluate to make sure that the learner has met the goal and to determine if the performance gap has been narrowed or dissolved. In looking at how human performance technology came into the field, we want to look at B.F. Skinner. We know that he worked on operant conditioning and learning processes. Then we have to look at how did he affect HPT. He did a lot of work on the learning processes and for HPT, but his work really came into play when he was a teacher to Thomas F. Gilbert, and that is how Gilbert became known as the father of HPT. In looking at this, we want to make sure that we look at an analysis. We want to look at the performance and determine a cause. We want to look at instructional technology. It played a role in helping the development of human performance technology. Instructional technology modifies human capabilities, and we've learned that instructional trainings were not always effective. And of course, a goal is to look at increasing performance, whether it's by the organization or an individual. Within human performance technology, you're going to see, if you do a lot of research, that there are many different definitions of human performance technology. Well, why are there so many different definitions for human performance technology? Well, according to Kang and Melinda, we see that there are 3 reasons why there is not a single definition for HPT. We know that HPT was influenced by behavior and cognitive psychology. It was influenced by information technology, organizational development, and other bodies of knowledge. And a lot of HPT practitioners would apply the term HPT differently to the field in which it was being used. We've learned that HPT was developed over 30 years ago, so we know that this terminology is still young in the field of development. Human performance technology defined for its application in educational technology. We have learned that HPT is systemic and systematic process where we're looking at human performance gaps, where they are analyzed, designed and developed interventions are implemented and evaluated for financial and non-financial results to increase human development. What do we mean by systematic here? For this paper, systematic is being defined as a linear step-by-step process that connects the analysis, design, implementation, and evaluation components of HPT. When we look at the systematic approach, HPT practitioners can follow a process to identify the performance gap to help provide changes in performance to achieve the desired performance goal. In looking at systemic, it looks at problems with internal and external connections. Human performance technology can also be viewed as the ability to help individuals and organizations develop greater performance for stakeholders and the organization. And this was information from TOTC 2006. In looking at 10 core HPT practitioner standard constructs, we want to look at this that was developed by the International Society for Performance Improvement, and this is also known as IPSE. In looking at that, we want to look at our first core construct. We want to look at maintaining focus on results or outcomes. Try to have that narrow view so we're not looking at other underlying reasons at the moment. We want to maintain that focus on what can we do to achieve desired results and outcomes. So first of all, we want to also look at determining the cause. What is the cause? What is the reason why individuals or organizations are not meeting that targeted goal? We want to make sure that we're looking at that systemic view where we're looking at the problems with the internal and external connections. As we've identified the gaps, we want to then make sure that we are developing solutions where we can include the implementation and evaluation. We want to make sure that it adds value, that the learner understands the purpose and why this intervention is being applied. We want to make sure that we can ensure solutions that are feasible. In developing those relationships with clients and stakeholders, it helps to have a better buy-in for the intervention. We want to make sure that we are solution-oriented in looking at the model. We want to determine the need or opportunity, and we want to evaluate the results and the impact. It is very important that once an intervention has been initiated and taught and reviewed and monitored over a certain number of weeks or days, determined that can be determined by the HPT practitioner or by the team that has made this intervention, that we want to evaluate. Has the individual made progress? Has the organization made progress? And what is that impact? Did we see a lot of growth to help close that performance gap? Or was it just minimal? And if it was minimal, what can be done? Does another solution for an intervention need to be developed, or continue on with the same intervention and then evaluate at a later time? These are all important constructs that we need to review and make sure that you understand what these are and how they can be implemented into your certain situation. According to Ademir and Kahn, educational technology is a distinct field due to the influence of psychology, especially behaviorism and cognitivism. It can be defined as a study and ethical practice of learning to improve performance by utilizing technological processes and resources. In looking at educational technology, we want to make sure that we are broadening those learning experiences in different instructional settings, such as synchronous or asynchronous learning environments, on-demand learning, or lifelong learning, according to Hong, etc. Technology, such as a pencil, has been in the traditional classroom settings for a long time. But digital technology has been emerging slowly into the learning environments, especially in the elementary classrooms. Educational technology was not as successful at first in the beginning stages. There are professional reviews to show the failure of how unsuccessful it was, because the market for educational technology expanded in such a fleeting time, and school districts were not prepared to purchase technology needed for integration into the classroom. But as we know, as the years progressed, technology became more of a staple in the classroom to enhance learning through educational technology. Now we want to look at the integration of human performance technology with educational technology. And we want to look at Kaufman and how Kaufman developed this how, what, and why, and how it could apply to human performance technology and educational technology. Well, when we look at the how portion, we want to focus on practitioners looking at the performance problem, and the design systems are then developed. Then we want to look at the what portion, where we're doing that front-end analysis. We want to look and see what is the gap, how can that gap be closed, what is the reason for the performance, so looking at the problem analysis. And then we need to look at that needs assessment. Does the learner have the knowledge and the training that is needed to complete the task that is being asked of them? Maybe that's due for the lack of performance. And then we want to look at the why. We want to look at the resources and the activities and the methods. We want to be viewing the individual performance results. How is the information presented to the learner for the organizational delivery? And we also want to make sure that we are considering the effect for learners and society. We want to make sure that in this how, what, why process that we're determining, is the problem worth fixing? If it is, what is the way that we can fix the problem? If it's not, then maybe a different way that the gap can be closed needs to be addressed. And we want to look at how it's produced and delivered and the impact on the stakeholders. We want to make sure, whether it's in the business world, you could have your investors that are the stakeholders, you could have your customers that are stakeholders. In the education system, you have stakeholders, teachers, parents, students, and how they are involved in reaching that targeted goal. Now it's interesting to look. Here is a chart that was taken from the Fundamentals of Performance Improvements. And when we look at this chart, we see that we have the performance analysis of need or opportunity. And as mentioned, we want to look at, previously, we want to look at organizational analysis. And in this analysis, we could look at the vision, mission, and values. What are the goals of the organization? And what are those critical issues that need to be refined? We also need to look at environmental analysis. And we want to look at also the worker, the work, the workplace, and the world. Later on, I'll be talking about professional development, which would be the worker. And when we focus in on the worker, do they have the knowledge and the skills or the capacity? What about motivation? How do you motivate someone to improve? You've given them all the tools and the knowledge to be successful, but if they're not motivated, how do you increase that motivation to improve performance? And then as part of the model, we want to look at the desired performance, what the gap is, the actual performance. And as mentioned earlier, we have that cause analysis. Is it due to environmental factors that the performance is not where it should be? Or could it be individual factors, as mentioned earlier? And then in the flow of the model for HPT, you want to make sure that you're looking at the intervention. You want to select an intervention that is going to be effective, and designing that and making sure that it is developed appropriately. So we have different areas that we want to look at for interventions and think about how that could be used and applied to educational technology for use in the traditional classroom and the educational system. So we could be looking at the learning. We could be looking at the performance support. What type of intervention could we use to help improve learning for students? What kind of support? Would it be educational technology, a certain type of computer program for reading interventions, which we'll discuss shortly? And then you want to maintain that intervention and implementation. Do you need extra support? What kind of employee development, or in this case of using it in the traditional classroom, what kind of learner support is needed? And then of course down here we have the evaluation. There are several different ways that you can determine the evaluation, in which one applies to the format in which you are using and applying the HPT model. So now let's look at educational technology in reading interventions in the traditional classroom. Well, I am an educator and I work with students who have reading deficits, and we want to look at how this technology can be used to provide those interventions. And we know that the technology use has increased in the traditional classroom, especially since COVID and the pandemic forced the education system to go online, and students were focusing on using the computer. Students always have a desire to use technology over traditional methods of learning. And there are some awesome programs available in the market that can be used for different interventions. And in studies that have been completed, it has been shown that when students are using technology, that their reading deficits did decrease when using technology. And that focused on some particular ones. We, according to Adequan, we have learned that 65% of fourth grade students were below the proficient level in 2017. Just think about that. 65% of fourth grade students were below that proficient level. What can be done? How can human performance technology be used in the education system to make this deficit decrease? We must figure out a way in order to help decrease this gap. And as we look at using more educational technology to provide interventions, we want to think about, are teachers trained in educational technology? Do they know how to use it? There's so many advancements made in technology, but can teachers in the classroom keep up? All teachers in the classroom? Professional development could be used as an intervention when applying that to the HPT model, because teachers may not be equipped with the right training to use ET to improve reading skills. Oftentimes, teachers sit through trainings and then it may not apply to them, so they tune out the training, and then when it's time for them to use it, they've forgotten because they didn't use those skills. As stated earlier, we know that utilizing the HPT model, that an intervention is needed to improve that performance gap. We want to look at how knowledge and attitudes of the teachers affect how educational technology will be used in the classroom. According to Darlene Hammond, we do want to see that oftentimes professional development courses are ineffective to encourage changes in teacher instruction to enhance student learning. A lot of times, technology is strictly used for instruction, and then students may complete activities paper and pencil, or may just use technology in a minimal way. So we have this TPACK theory that is going to look at the pedagogical and disciplinary knowledge and how it can be applied to technology. And it's used as a guide to help make sure that educators have training that is applicable to technology. And allowing teachers to participate in this collaborative process and peer mentoring can be used as a teaching strategy for professional development, according to Romu and Fantilis. According to information from Tondor, we want to make sure that we allow educators to share examples of good teaching practices, which helps develop that better understanding for application, which then transfers into the classrooms. In making decisions about professional development for teachers, all stakeholders must be involved to provide lifelong learning for educational technology in the classroom. In thinking about human performance technology and the application of educational technology and using that for reading interventions, we want to think about all the steps in the model of human performance technology. As I've mentioned earlier, there are so many different technology programs available, such as Ames Web, Lexicor 5, that can be used. Also Sounded Out, Trainer Text, GraphoGame, Tutoring Buddy. In looking at 41 out of 45 studies conducted in the literature review, it was determined that students' reading deficits did decrease when using technology. In a study conducted by Barron, a focus was to look at online progress monitoring tools for reading. And this is looking at the progress of reader profiles on a technology-based reading program, and it evaluated the reader profiles to determine gains of the students. There was a study that was conducted where third grade students participated, and they were using that Lexicor 5 reading program. And that is a technology-based instructional program that helps to develop literacy skills in students, according to Barron. They used this program for 20 weeks for 20 to 80 minutes a week. And then the results, as mentioned earlier, said that the skills did decrease in students, that the deficit skills did decrease. When we look at the HPT model and how that can be applied, the Ames Web assessments would be helping to identify that worker, the environmental analysis, and then the performance gap. The intervention and implementation portion of HPT would be that Core 5 reading program, which also evaluates students as they work through the program, and that is a formative assessment. HPT methods can be used by educators to help close the performance gap in students. There have been a study that was conducted in Afghanistan on 3 high schools by Hashmi and his team of researchers, and it did show how the HPT model was utilized and how students were looking at the performance and the desired goal and the analysis of the root cause and the interventions. And it showed that the importance of the role of the principal in applying that HPT model was very important, and that more training on the model should be utilized to provide the school leadership with more effective information so that it could be implemented to better school improvement. That analysis is very important to make sure it's focusing on students who are exhibiting performance gaps, and teachers should have that professional development, effective professional development on educational technology for implementation for reading interventions and using programs if the district offers that access to it. And that is often the cause, money and not being able to purchase programs that are that effective, because one of the goals is to make sure that we are preparing students for the 21st century. But it cannot be done if we are not looking at and analyzing what is the problem, what interventions can be used and implemented. What are we doing to make sure that we are evaluating students with effective assessments? We want to make sure that we're looking at the growing field of the relationship between human performance technology and educational technology, because it's still such a young concept of integrating HPT into the educational world, that there are still lots of research that needs to be conducted in how it can be used in the traditional classroom, because the goal is to make sure that we are preparing our students for the 21st century. Please make sure that you review the references that are available at the end of the presentation. If you have any more questions, you may look up this information. And this presentation could not be made possible without the templates made by Slides Go. That is the program that I used for that.